שחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה, מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים. שחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה שחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה, מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים. שחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה
thanks to you, ever-living sovereign, that you have restored my soul to me in mercy. How great is your trust. And as we start to welcome this morning of Shabbat, we welcome those joining us through Zoom and here in person at TVT. And of course, we acknowledge the presence of those in YouTube. We follow you, we see you there joining us week after week there in YouTube. And of course, also those in Facebook. Let's say, in whatever media you are joining us, we're happy to see you. We're happy to feel your presence. We're on page 192. As we look around, we acknowledge the presence of our loving community, the community that we build, the community that we aspire to be. מטובו עליך יעקב משכנותיך, ישראל, בני ברוב חסדך, אבוא ביתך, שתחווה לך על קודשך, ביראתך. אדוני, אהבתי מאוד ביתך ומקום מכאן כבודך. ואני תפילתי היא לך, אדוני, את רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. On page 194, you can find the blessing for the well-functioning of our bodies. I invite you to read those words, but also to close your eyes and to think about your own body for a moment, to think about the attention that your body requires. So often we neglect our bodies. So often we push too much, or sometimes we don't push enough. Remind ourselves that our bodies are the vessels, the sanctuaries that hold our existence. They deserve sacred devotion. They deserve to be loved. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Baruch ata Adonai, rofeh kol basar umafli la'asot. We're on page 196 for the blessing for our souls.
נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא, אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא, אתה
אשר בידו נפש כל חי, ורוח כל בשר איש.
Amen.
We turn our Sidurim to page 198 for the blessings, for the daily miracles. Birkot HaShachar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has given the mind the ability to distinguish day from night.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens the eyes of the blind.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who frees the captive.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who lift up the fallen.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who stretches the earth over the waters.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who strengthens our steps.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, anoten layafef koach.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes, slumber from the eyelids.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who made me in the image of God.
Amen. Baruch atah.
Wait. Think about the fact that every time we say this blessing, everyone says this blessing. So when we say the image of God, we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, but we also can find the image of God when we look at each other. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam,
Who has made me free.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who girds Israel with strength.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Israel with splendor. Page 204. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, אשר קידש שלום במצוותיו, וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה.
Amen.
O Adonai, our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you, by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל.
Amen.
Page 206.
These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's parents, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all.
We turn now our Sidurim to page 212 for the blessing for the Psukei de Simra.
Baruch Shamar Vayaolam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Choseh Bereshit, Baruch Omer Ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer U'Mekayem, Baruch Merachem Al Haaretz, Baruch Merachem Al Habriot, Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov Yireach, Baruch Haila'at V'Kayam Lanetzach, Baruch Podeh U'Matzil, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Hay Lai 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 Lai, 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 Hay Lai 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 Lai.
Pray. Find the ability to make the melodies of our lives a song of praise. We seek for connection with you. מלך מהולל,
בתשבחות, מלך מהולל, בתשבחות,
ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל, בתשבחות. page 214, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. Say it again. מזמור שיר, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני, לזמר לשמך עליון. טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני, לזמר לשמך עליון. לילה להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך, אמונתך בלילות. להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך, אמונתך בלילות. טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני, לזמר לשמך עליון. טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני, לזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך, אמונתך בלילות. להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך, אמונתך בלילות. Page 215. Happy are those who dwell in your house. Who will forever praise you. אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יהללוך סלה.
אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלה. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלה. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך סלה. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלה. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלה. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך סלה. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך סלה.
תהילת לדוד, רוממך לא היה מלך, ועברך שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל ים אברכך, בלילה שמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, וגדולתו אין חקר.
דולתו ישבח מעשיך, וגבורותיך יגידו.
הדר כבודך, בדברי נפלותיך עשיך.
וזוז נורותיך יאמרו, וגדולתך אספרנה.
זכר טובך יביאו, בצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני האדם גבורותיו, וכבוד אדם מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יישברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעתו. פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכל חי רצון. צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדונך לכל קוראיו, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראה ויעשה בית שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומר אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך יה,
מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה. We're on page 218 for Psalm 150.
הללויה, הללויה בקודשו, הללויה בקיע עוזו, הללויה בגבורותיו, הללויה כרוגותו, הללויה בתקע שופר, הללויה בנבל וכינור, הללויה בטוב ומחור, הללויה במינים ועוגב,
הנשמה תהלל יה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללויה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללויה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללויה, הללויה. נשמת כל חי תברך את שמך, אדוני אלוהינו ברוח כל בשר, תפאר ותתרומן זכרך מלכנו תמיד מן העולם ועד העולם. אתה אין לנו מלך אלא אתה. Master of all generations, who is praised in a multitude of praises, who guides the world with abundant loving kindness and all creatures with mercy. Adonai neither slumbers nor sleeps. God awakens the sleeping and rouses those who slumber, gives speech to the mute, and God loosens the bonds of captives. God supports the fallen and strengthens those who are bent over. You alone do we acknowledge. We're on page 220.
Norinas,
דרכנו קלות באיילון. God, in the power of your strength, creating the glory of your name, mighty forever, awesome in amazing deeds, a ruler who sits on a high and exalted throne. We're on page 222.
שוכן הוד מרום וקדוש שמו, וכתוב רננות צדיקים באדוני, לישרים נבוא תהילה, בפי ישרים תתהלל, ודברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש, ובמקלות ריבות עמך בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו, בכל דור ודור. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, שושבחה הלב וזמרה, עוז ממשלה, נצח גדולה גבורה, תהילה ותפארת, קדושה ומלכות, ברכות והודות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך הוא ברוך שמו,
אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודות אדון הנפלאות, הבחר בשירי זמרה, מלכי העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעל מה יברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה, שמי תקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחה
page 226. Please rise for Baruch.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך,
seated. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. Originally in the Mishnah, it's not written הכל. It's not written the one who creates everything. Actually, it's written creator of evil. And I think it's interesting that intellectually, when we read Mishnah, we understand that the creation is all-encompassing. Everything is a part of the creation. When we pray, we try to set some things aside. So we say akol, but what hides behind the word akol is the recognition that next to the light that we love and we experience in our world, there are other things. There are things that we might not like as much as that Or Hadash, as that new light. And sometimes acknowledging them is the best way to, not to eliminate them, because sometimes we can't eliminate those things. They are part of our world. They're here. But sometimes recognizing them, calling them by their name, is the way to give them less space in our lives. When we pray, when we bless the orot, the lights that surround us, it's not without recognizing that we need to focus ourselves, that we need to work hard to give attention to those lights, and we recognize that other things to which we don't want to pay our attention. Numerous are your works, Adonai. In wisdom you formed them all, filling the earth with your creatures. We praise Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created. May they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praise are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot.
Amen.
Deep love and abundant love. We're on page 230. Ahava Rava,
Ahava Rabba,
Ahava Rava,
Ahava Rabba,
Ahava Rava,
Ahava Rabba,
Ahavtanu, Ahava Rava,
Ahava Rabba,
Ahava Rava,
Ahava Rabba,
Ahava Rava,
Ahava Rabba,
Ahavtanu, 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 Adonai Eloheinu. How deeply you have loved us.
How deeply you have loved us. How deeply you have loved us. Adonai Eloheinu. How deeply you have loved us. How deeply you have loved us. How deeply you have loved us. Adonai Eloheinu.
Ahavarava, 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 Ahavtanu, 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 Adonai Eloheinu. Guide us in peace from the four corners of the earth, and lead us upright to our land. For you, O God, work wonders. You chose us, truly you drew us near to your great name, that we might acknowledge you, declaring you one in love. Praise be you, Adonai, who chooses your people Israel in love. Baruch atah Adonai, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. On page 232 for the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
Adonai Echad.
Please join me in chanting Ve'ahavta on page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, ושרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Adonai said to Moses as follows: Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of Adonai and observe them, so you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Continue with the silent reading over page 228. In great joy, Moshe, Miriam, and Israel responded with song to you, all of them proclaiming, "Who is like you, O God? Mi kamocha, Elim Adonai." We're on page 240.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא, נורא תהילות עושה פלא, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ועמלו, אדוני כמלוך לעולם בארץ. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל, תקומך יהודה וישראל. עלינו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. אלי אלי ברוך אתה, אדוני
page 242 for Filat Hamidah.
Adonai, שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, קומי חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכה חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומשיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה.
גיבור לעולם אדוני, לחיי מתים אתה, רב להושיע. יושב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מחלקל חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים. אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני יחד. מי כמוך בגבולות ומי דומה לך. מלך מצביח ישור, la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la la. למען אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני לחיי המתים.
בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך כל הארץ. לנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. ישמחו מלכותך שוב לשוב כל יום, גם כנשי שבי, כולם ישבו ויתענגו מטובך, והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, עמדתי ממתו קראת זכר למעשה בראשית.
יצא עולה אלינו, חסד ותפלתם בבת תקווה, בדיל הרצון תמיד עבוד בישראל עמך. On page 258, let's ask all of us, our Creator, with the light of your face. ברכנו יוצרנו, כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד, לאור פניך. ברכנו יוצרנו, כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד, באור 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 פניך. ברכנו אבינו, כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד, באור פניך. ברכנו יוצרנו, כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד, באור פניך. ברכנו יוצרנו, כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד, באור פניך. ברוך אתה אדוני, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. Now, yes, friends, we will invite you to turn your Siddurim to page 362 in order to start our Torah service. As we open the ark, we will also invite you to rise.
אין כמוך ואלוהים, אדוני, בין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני הוס אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
אחד אלוהינו, גדול אדוננו, קדוש שמו. גדלו לאדוני איתי, ונרוממה שמו יחדיו.
No hay como nuestro Dios, no hay como nuestro Señor, no hay como nuestro Rey, no hay como nuestro Salvador. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. May be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We don't know. We can put it down. No. Yeah. Thank you. Just in case. Thank you. We'll bring it back. You can see that so many things to move around as we start speaking about Torah. For those that were here yesterday, our printer still not working. So here I am, just to keep some notes out there. So let me give you some context to this. I think that when we think about our parents, there is a stage in which we believe that our parents are perfect. There's a stage in our lives in which we tend to believe that our parents know everything. And at some point, we start to be a bit more critical. And then we think, when we are teenagers, that our parents know nothing. And then when we grow up a little bit more, we realize that maybe they do know something. And as we go back and forth in the cycles of our lives, we have different moments of appreciation, of understanding, of the messages and, in general terms, of our parental figures. Can you hear me well today? Good. Now, when we speak about our forefathers and mothers, it's a bit different. You could read the Torah thinking that our parents were perfect, and because that's how we attach ourselves to the Torah, thinking that is an elevated, high, wonderful text, we could tend to think that our parents were perfect. Now, we do know that the Torah doesn't try to present us with models of human perfection. As a matter of fact, humans are not perfect. We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to be, in a good case, perfecting ourselves. We're supposed to be working on it all the time. That's why you can do teshuvah until the very moment before you die. You are supposed to be able to work, to grow, and at the moment you can't do that anymore, that's it, that's the end. Now, in the context of our parents, and in this case I mean Abraham and Sarah, you could say that they are not perfect, but then something happens because of our love for Torah, because of our love for the stories of the Torah. We tend to justify their actions, and when we struggle with their actions, we need to find some kind of explanation to that. So there's a commentary that doesn't challenge our parental figures in the Torah. That's one approach. There's one approach that challenges them a little bit, but then when you go deeper in that approach, you see that the most challenged character in the story of our parents, Abraham and Sarah, is actually Sarah. Abraham is somehow more justified, and Sarah, not so much. The text, most of the time, is talking to Abraham. Now, Sarah is there, and the question is what's happening with her when she is there. We talk very little about her life experience, what she was thinking about, what was happening to her. And I think that as we grow in our relationship with Torah, we can also grow in the questions we ask regarding this personality. I want to say something else before I offer a few ideas. And it's that sometimes we fall into dichotomies. And we say, okay, if Abraham is the symbol of chesed, of kindness, which in our tradition, Abraham is the symbol of kindness, and there are very difficult stories to explain in the history of Abraham and Sarah. So if Abraham is kindness, what Sarah should be? Crickets. Because the tendency is to think, well, the opposite, right? No, she could be a very kind figure as well. She can be a generous woman as well. She can be an activist as well. She can also be something that is not as well. She can be also something else, but not necessarily the opposite. And we don't explain the difficult stories by saying, okay, so he was the kind one, and she was the evil one, and therefore we have these difficult stories. No, there were two human beings dealing with life. And I want to emphasize for a moment some aspects of Sarah's life. So we are exposed. We learn about Sarah and Sarai and Abram for the first time in Parashat Lech Lecha. So I want to define an emotional profile. Now, we speak about Abraham being courageous and leaving the house of his parents, right? So he was courageous, and she was an attachment. I don't know what she was doing, but she left too. She was there. So she also left the house of her parents. She also somehow was invested in this project. Now, was she an attachment? Was she a partner? We don't know that. We might learn that later on in the story. But for now, what we do know, when we speak about the hardship of leaving behind the reality you knew, that this is an equal situation for both. The two of them left the reality they knew. There's one difference. They left the reality they knew because something that he was thinking about, a conversation that he was having with God. Now, God is speaking in singular. in the biblical narrative. Lech lecha is not lechu lachem. No, you go. It's a singular you. Maybe they were like one. That's a possibility. Now, that's why David Friedman later on wrote lechilach, right? to create some balance there. Now, immediately after they go in their way, what happens to them? They go through Egypt. Now, what happens in Egypt? She gets sold off. She is sold. Abraham suddenly realizes that she's too beautiful, and he says, if they recognize your beauty, they kill your husband. Maybe he heard something about King David at the time. But he says very clearly, or maybe those that were writing the story were thinking about King David. That's a historical possibility as well. Now, he sells her. Now, because of her beauty, because it was dangerous. Now, what happens to her? What's her experience? Well, she's a part of the courtiers, she's part of an harem, right? Like of a group of women that are around the Pharaoh. What happens to her? What happens to this character that is in a journey with her husband? They are following a call, they are following a belief. What happens in her emotional experience? We don't hear about that. We don't know what happened to her. We don't know how that affects her life. We don't know if she was a willing partner of this or she was an unwilling partner of this. We know very little about this. What do you know? She was very loyal. Yafé. You got me one story too early. But that's it. But that's fine. What we do know is that her commitment to her husband is absolute. So this partnership is absolute. Still, so we know a trait of character, but we don't know experience. We know that trait of character because of the willingness to risk her life or to risk her well-being in order to protect her husband's life, and also to follow him first in a journey that is unknown. It's unknown to him, it's an uncertain journey to him, and even more uncertain to her. Now, we hear, by the end of Lech Lecha, that she understands the responsibility for the covenant, and she understands that this covenant, this story, this thing that they need to fulfill, requires children. And she's barren. She's infertile. In the Torah, by definition, every time that we speak about infertility, the one who carries it is the woman. And that's how the narrative is written. Does it make it right? No. But that's how the narrative is written. Now, she tries to fix this challenge. They need to go on in this journey, and maybe accepting this limitation, he brings Agar into the picture. Here now she's an investor, or she's being over-empathetic toward her husband. She's an absolute believer in the journey. I don't know, but there's a strong action here. And maybe all these things are coming together. Empathy, faith, support, investment. But that's how Agar comes into the picture. Now, years later, how many years later? 13 years later. 13 years. By that time, she was, I don't know, I think if my accounting doesn't fail me, she was probably 78. Okay? If I'm making the math correctly. Now she said, it says, and God remembered Sarah. And now God tells her, you'll have a child. Now you tell me, we have Ishmael already for 13 years. Think about the persistence, the tenacity to remain in the journey, to understand that it's a marathon. And in the meantime, this child is growing. next to her. And if she was invested in this story of legacy, she probably feels by now that her legacy is absolutely lost. She couldn't bring a child. Abraham was able to bring a child with Agar. She couldn't. Now, what happens in Bayera? So Sarah's presence is over 3 Torah portions: Lech Lecha, Bayera, and then Hayei Sarai, in which she died. And I want to say that her presence doesn't end with her death. I want to add something else to that, but we'll get to that in a moment. So what happens in Bayera? Bayera, he's healing from the Brit Milah, from the circumcision, and God appears to him, and then God appears to him next to him in the tent, and then maybe in the image of these 3 strangers, in these 3 possible angels, and that Abraham runs toward them and invites them to come into the house, right, into the tent. And he asks her to prepare food, and so he does as well. So this idea of hosting guests was done in partnership. What we know again about her is that she was working with him. She was in this journey for many years. She had a child that wasn't hers. She was sold so he didn't get killed, and she kept working, hosting people. And now, one of these 3 says, in a year from now, you have a child. And she laughs. Why? Because Melech. And after a week, Abimelech has a dream, and the dream says something like, until you don't return this woman that doesn't belong to you and has a husband, your people will experience misery. And so he realizes it's Sarah, and he returns Sarah to Abraham, and he tells him, don't ever come back. Go away. I don't want to see you. And now she gives birth, finally, to Isaac. Now there's even rabbinical commentary that says maybe it wasn't Abraham's child. Maybe it was Abimelech. So to this point, even to questioning the legitimacy of her child. Anyways, Abraham's child anyway. Well, but often the approach to Sarah is like she was a container, a vessel. And I think she was a subject, an important subject in this journey. But before we get there, and I will prove my point at the end, how important she was. And now, she has a child, and she sees this child laughing, playing with his stepbrother. She can't stand it. She can't stand it. She says, I can't see this anymore. This is not going to work. This fellow child will try to kill my child, will try to take the blessing for him. I don't want them to be here anymore. The Torah also says that Agar wasn't behaving so well to Sarah. That's a possibility too. But without trying to add things to defend her in terms of her relationship with Agar, I don't know if by now you have some empathy toward her life experience and her brokenness. Toward the woman who left the house of her parents following a dream that she not for sure completely understood. For the woman who was willing to be sold in order to protect the well-being of her husband. For the woman that was a partner on doing the work that her husband believed they needed to do, and maybe she did believe that too. For the woman that was sold, that told her husband to have a child with a different woman so he could have continuity. For the woman that was sold a second time. And now, she's afraid that someone will take over her child. Is her decision-making good? No. Like, is her attitude the best attitude? No. But in the text, it's justified by God's approval. Abraham is broken. No? And in this Torah portion, Abraham's broken, emotionally broken, by the fact that he needs to separate from Ishmael and Agar. But he seems to be fine when he understands that he needs to sacrifice his own child. right? Like it's a bit confusing. Now, which is the next thing? The next thing is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Now we don't know anything else about her. They go to do the binding of Isaac, and the Midrash says that when she heard about that, she died. The Midrash says that when she heard about the binding of Isaac, about Abraham trying to sacrifice Isaac, she couldn't take it, and she died. Now, in Parashat Hayei Sarah, this Torah portion, we hear that Abraham comes to mourn her and to take care of her funeral. So he was somewhere else. We don't know where he was coming from. But we do know a couple of things that happened at the very end of Sarah's life, immediately after her life, and at the beginning of this Torah portion. The first is that Abraham feels very strongly about honoring her. And he goes out of his way to buy a piece of property to bury her. You know where? Hebron. In Hebron, they are buried together. So we learn that she lived 127 years. And the Torah is very specific about those years. And the rabbis explain that she lived fully. And therefore, each one of those years counts. So maybe she was a willing partner, and she was a believer in the journey. But we know something about her character. Abraham goes out of his way to find a place to bury her, and so for him later on to be buried next to her. We know that immediately after she dies, Abraham takes care of finding a wife for Isaac, maybe because he recognizes his lack of emotional ability to support Isaac. We know that there's another woman that comes to be with Abraham, Torah. The Midrash and the Talmud say that Torah might be Agar coming back. Torah is the wife of Abraham, the second and the third one, depends how you count. We know that Abraham couldn't be alone. He couldn't manage alone. He needed a wife immediately. And we know that Abraham thought that his son needed a wife immediately. And you would say, well, because she took care of, making bread. So what's the first thing we learn about the relationship of Isaac and Rebekah? What? They see each other. She's in this donkey, like she falls. She's totally overwhelmed by seeing him, and she runs to him. Where do they go? They go to Sarah's tent. They go to Mom's tent. And the text says, "Until Lehem bachot." And you will be like a mother and a sister to me. The first need that Rebekah will fulfill is emotional support, is nurturing Isaac, who is quite lost, who is a person who just experienced trauma and the loss of his mother. And the text says that Rebekah will be like a mother to him, will be a nurturing figure to him. So we know that actually Abraham loved her, that Abraham actually needed her very, 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 very deeply, and that the entire environment actually needed Sarah. So here's the case I wanted to make about her, is that often when we read the story, we just read the story. We just read the story, and we tend to, in order to tell the story, we tend to objectify figures that can somehow represent the story already heard. And I think that as loving readers of Torah, our responsibility is to dig deeper in these stories and to find the narratives of those that we might not be seeing. We often live our lives without recognizing narratives that are around us and they are silenced because We just go about our life without noticing them. The way in which the Torah is written doesn't emphasize Sarah's life. And guess what? The rabbinical commentary does not emphasize her life either. So we could choose to be a link in the tradition of those that ignore important narratives, or we can choose to have a different relationship with our parents and to recognize the complexity of their narratives, to recognize the complexity of their stories, and to look at them with love and empathy. We can start by Sarah, maybe easier. Shabbat Shalom. When you're setting up, I will sing.
I guess I'm on now. I'd like to add a footnote. This Parsha, I was not familiar with it when I named my daughter Heather, who a number of you know because she grew up in this synagogue. And I named her after my father's aunt, Clara, was Chaya, and my father's sister, Sarah, was Sarah. So her name is Chaya Sarah. Just a personal note. Okay. With that, we're on page 156 in the Blue Book. And I could use glasses. Yam Tu, Aliyah Rashon, Herschel ben Abraham HaKohen, Henry Cohen, and reading will be Mark Filowitz.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarach. Baruch Adonai hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher b'chabanu michol amim v'notalanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'Avraham zaken ba bayamim Adonai berach et Avraham v'akol. Vayomer Abraham el abdo zekan beito hamshel v'chol asher lo shir na yadcha tachat yarechi v'ashbi'echa v'Adonai Elohai hashamayim Elohei haaretz asher lo tikach isha libnei mibnot hakanati asher anochi yoshev b'kirbo ki el artzei v'el moleto veloti telach v'lakachta isha libnei liyitzchak vayomer elav aved ulei lo taveh האישה לא לכת אחרי אל הארץ הזאת, האשיב את בנך אל הארץ אשר יצאת משם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nota b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Yam Tu, Aliyah Asheni, Moshe Yerachmiel ben Avraham, Mitchell Goldberg, and reading will be Daphne Guterman.
Baruch Adonai Hamroch Le'olam Voed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'noatan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
אמן. ויאמר אליו אברהם, הישמר לך פן תשיב את בני שמה, ואדוני אלוהי השמיים, אשר לקחני מבית אבי ומארץ מולדתי, ואשר דיבר לי, ואשר נשבע לי לאמור, לזרעך אתן את הארץ הזאת, הוא ישלח מלאכו לפניך, ולקחת אישה לבני משם, ואם לא תובע האישה ללכת אחריך, וניקית משבועתי הזאת, רק את בני לא תשב שמה. וישם העבד את ידו תחת ירך אברהם אדוניו, וישבע לו את הדבר הזה. ויקח העבד 10 גמלים מגמלי אדוניו, וילך וכל טוב אדוניו בידו, ויקום וילך אל ארם נהריים, אל עיר נחור, ויברך הגמלים מחוץ לעיר אל באר המים, לעת ערב לצאת השואבות.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Yasher Koach. Yam Tov, Aliyah Hashlishi, Malka Bat Charhe, Ludmila Turlin, and Mila Turlin, and reading will be Nitza Hennig.
ברכו את אדוני המברך. ברוך אדוני המברך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
ויאמר אדוני אלוהי אדוני אברהם, הקרנה לפני היום, ועשה חסד עם אדוני אברהם. הנה אנוכי ניצב על עין המים, ובנות אנשי העיר יוצאות לשאוב מים. והיה נער אשר אומר אליה, התינה חדיך ואשתה, ואמרה שתה, וגם גמליך אשקה אותה. הוכחת לעבדך ליצחק, ובעדה כי עשית חסד עם אדוני. ויהי הוא טרם קהילה לדבר, והנה רבקה יוצאת, אשר יולדה לבתואל בן מלכה, אשת נחור, אחי אברהם, וחדה על שכמה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Yasher Koach. Yam Tu hamaftir, Miriam Shoshana Bat Farfol Esther, Miriam Van Ralt, and chanting will be Gabriel Newman.
Now, for those that heard the family link between Abraham and Sarah, what you will notice now is that actually they were step siblings. Now, the important thing to say, there is a concept in Jewish law that is related to which part of the truth you emphasize. And it's called leshanot davar, to change the thing. And it's for the sake of someone's well-being, and the halakha uses this case. You don't lie, but you emphasize a part of the truth that might not be the truth of the kind of main core of the thing, but it's an aspect of the truth, and that's the case here. It's not completely a lie, it's called changing the thing, because there's some connection with some truth in that thing. Baruch Adonai
Mevarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ve'ele shmot b'nei Ishmael bishmotam levodotam b'chor Ishmael naviot v'kidar ve'ad be'er umivsam umishma ve'duma umisa chadal ve'tema yetur nafish v'kedma Elehem b'nei Ishmael ve'leshmotam b'chatzreihem uftirotam shneim asar nisi'im le'umotam ve'ele shnei chayei Ishmael me'ad shana ושלושים שנה ושבע שניים ויגב ויאמץ ויאסף אל עמיו וישכנו מחבילה עד שור אשר על פני מצרים בואכה אשורה על פני כל אחיו נפל.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. תודה.
We take a moment to acknowledge those that came up to the Torah. We say, Yeshurach Avoteinu v'Imoteinu, ויברך את אלה אשר עלו לתורה לכבוד השבת, לכבוד התורה ולכבוד הקהילה שלנו. Anyone who blessed our ancestors and our mother Sarah will bless all those who came up to the Torah in honor of Shabbos, the Torah, and our community, our beloved community. May all of you are blessed with the blessing of protection of our Creator. May you find rescue from any trouble or distress. May you find healing from any illness, minor or serious. May you find parnasa, sustainability, and may you find success in all your endeavors, together with all Israel. And let us say,
Amen.
we also take a moment to acknowledge those that are dealing with illness. זה משברך אבותינו ואמותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שרה, רבקה, רחל ולאה, ויברך את החולים, the one who bless our ancestors. We'll bless those that are dealing with illness, and we invite you to share the names of those you are thinking of in the comment section on Facebook, YouTube, and of course in Zoom. And if you're here in person, to share those names out loud.
Marla Kazin, Jonathan Kazin, Silgiano.
May the blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. Let us say,
Amen.
please rise for Agva Anglila. Besot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai Beyad Moshe.
Ashlosha devarim, Ashlosha devarim, Ashlosha devarim, Ha'olam, Ha'olam, Amen. Ashlosha devarim, Ashlosha devarim, Ashlosha devarim, Ha'olam, Ha'olam, Amen. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim.
יצחי ימי למחזיקים בה, בתומכי המאושר. דרכיה דרכי נועם, בכל נתיבותיה, נתיבות שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. Return us to you, Adonai, please. Return us to you, Adonai, and we will return. Help us remember that your ways, the paths of Torah, are pleasant paths, are paths of shalom, of peace. As we turn our study into page 586 for Eleinu Leshabeach. Behashevota
Behashevota
elevavecha
elevavecha
ki Adonai
ki Adonai
hu Elohim
hu Elohim
Behashevota
Behashevota
elevavecha
elevavecha
ki Adonai
ki Adonai
hu Elohim
hu Elohim v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
May we see there. We're back. It's interesting to go back and forth, right? Like at the end of Kaddish, we go back. And it's interesting that when we say Oseh Shalom, Bim Bromav, etc., the one who makes peace in the world, and then you go back. Maybe an important consideration is that when we really try to make peace, we have to recognize that we need to create a space for an other. So step back a little bit. So there's space, there's room for the existence of an other. We'll take a moment now to acknowledge our mourners. We acknowledge those during the first 7 days of mourning, Shiva. We acknowledge those during the cycle of the first year of mourning. So during the cycle of the first 30 days of mourning, Shloshim. I see Barbara Levine, Alicia Levine also. And remembering the beloved husband and father, our friend and Rabbi Art Levine. If you are during the cycle of the first year of mourning,
John Giano.
you finish the cycle for your brother? Is yours or no? So if you have a your side? It's a year, right? No. It's a year of the passing of Mark's brother. I'm looking on. We invite all those joining us in Zoom and Facebook and YouTube to share the names of those you are remembering as we turn our Siddur to page 598 for Kaddish Avelim, Mourners Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה,
Amen.
בעלמא דברה חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו,
Amen.
יהא שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו,
Amen.
יהא שלום רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו,
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו, אמן.
May the memories of your dear ones be always a blessing. Yeh Zichram Baruch. You may be seated. Give you one more idea about this Oseh Shalom thing. I'm stepping back from a different perspective. Kabbalah explains that in order to allow the creation, the infinite, God as the infinite, needed to somehow reduce itself. Needed to contract itself. And that's called tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is, letzamtzem means to reduce. The theory, the idea of the tzimtzum is this idea of the divine stepping back, reducing itself as the infinite existence in order to create humanity, but not only humanity that has free will. And sometimes in order to allow, and maybe that's also the rebirth of hope, in order to allow new experiences and hope in our lives, we need to step back. We need to step back with our pain and from our pain, with and from, in order to recognize new things that can emerge and bring renewal to our lives. So for those that heard, I know it's relevant, so I'll repeat it. Daphne here, Mitch, you're here, Henry, you're here. The reason I'm saying that is I just got an email from Moshe Gold, our tour guide in Israel, a few days ago, and he said, "Hey, Rabbi Nico, I'm going to be in town. Do you want to do something?" So he's teaching a class, actually, a very interesting class. So we will invite him to teach the class at TVT, and so for those that would like to meet him, we'll try to put something together. We'll do it immediately, probably the day after the Crystal Nacht. I need to confirm, not promising yet, but probably, most likely, 90% is if Rachel fully approves it. On Wednesday, November 10th at 6 p.m., we'll do a short Ma'ariv in honor of the Crystal Nach. We'll light candles, and then Moshe will talk a little bit about some of the new social enterprises happening in Israel, one of them related to Shoah survivors. And also, he will be sharing some of his pictures. Those that had the opportunity to travel with him know that he's a photographer, he's quite good, really good. So you will be able to see some of his pictures and hear the stories. So where you were in Israel with Moshe, or you weren't in Israel with Moshe, we'll have a very nice evening. So we encourage you to join, and we'll tell you exactly when on Monday when our office is open. Okay, so just wanted to make that announcement. And tonight we have Havaya Ba'erev, as we do once a month, and we will have a congregational Havdalah. So for those that want to join us, you can check in our website for more details. We will conclude our service with Igdal on page
628.
628. Yai lai da da dai 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 yai da da dai 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 ya la 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 dai 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 am da da dai 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 ya la 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 dai 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 ya la 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 dai 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 Yidai Elohim chai וישתבח נמצא
בעת, מציאותו נמצא בעת, מציאותו אחד ואין יחיד, כייחודו נעלם וגם אין סוף, לאחדותו נעלם
וגם אין סוף לאחדותו אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף לא נערוך אליו קדושתו לא נערוך אליו קדושתו קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא ראשון והן ראשית לראשיתו ראשון והן ראשית לראשיתו אינו אדון עולם לכל נוצר יורה גדולתו ומלכותו יורה גדולתו ומלכותו שפע נבואתו נבנו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו ay ay la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ay ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 לא קם בישראל כמו שהוד נביא ומביא את אמונתו נביא ומביא את אמונתו תורת אמת נתן לעמו על יד נביאו למען ביתו על יד נביאו למען ביתו לא יחליף האל ולא ימיר דתו לעולמים לסולתו לעולמים לסולתו חיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך הדיין שם תהילתו ברוך הדיין שם תהילתו אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמיו בשלום שבת שלום ומבורך everyone שבת שלום היי היי די די די
la 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 la